Hi, Shannon. Good morning, or Stephanie. Good morning for me, and I think midday for you.
Exactly. Yep. Lunchtime here in Pittsburgh.
Excellent. Well, thank you for joining for this. I know we've interacted through various conferences and, and just the community in general for quite a long time. But you know, glad to get you on the stream here.
Yeah. Thank you for having me. Yeah. This is my first time with you here. So this is exciting. I appreciate it.
Yeah, absolutely. It's. I think you definitely have one of the more unique, I think, spins and personalities out there with the witches design and all that. And similar parallels, I think, and so some of the stuff that I do with the wizards. So like and the magic elements. So I've always appreciated that.
Exactly. Yep. We're the witch and wizard here, huh?
Exactly. Yeah. You creating the concoctions and everything together. But yeah, I'm glad to get you on for this today. I certainly know I think it's been a long time coming. You're what would this number be now? This is probably the 170th, 180th stream that I've done at this point.
Wow. Congratulations.
Thank you. It's been a few over the years, but it's one of my favorite ways, honestly, to enjoy Friday a little bit. It's if anything, actually, a nice secondary benefit to a lot of these is it gives me a chance to actually learn quite a bit. So considering it's 170 hours of expert content from other people, it's actually allowed me to absorb quite a lot as a sponge over the years. So I think I've certainly had a chance to grow my knowledge and I think my community relationships quite a bit. So it's a nice added benefit to connect more with the community this way.
Yep, for sure, for sure.
So I think what I usually like to do with a lot of these, and Donald's mentioning that he has friends everywhere in the chat, the maybe a chance for you to do a little introduction on yourself, spend a bit of time introducing yourself to the channel. Anything that you want to share about yourself, any fun facts or anything. We'll use that to chat a little bit, and then eventually segue into kind of the topic of the day today.
All right, sounds good. Thanks again.
Okay.
Yes, so I'm Stephanie Bruno. I am here in Pittsburgh, Pennsylvania, joining you today. So yes, lunchtime here. And let's see, so introduction a little bit about me. My background is all in IT, but primarily in the nonprofit space. So I'm used to doing things on a shoestring, really trying to squeeze every dollar of value out of any budget that I'm working with. And the reason that now my organization is called Data Witches, and a little backup there, I recently went independent. So yeah, now Data Witches is full time. So, I do training and consulting for Power BI and Fabric. And just, you were talking about the names. How did we become witches and wizards, right? So again, as working in nonprofit and working on a shoestring, I always needed to find just utilities and clever tricks to get around things and make things work. And one that I always had trouble with was, after you build your semantic model and you build all these test measures, and then by the time you're ready, you realize I have so much extra junk in here that I don't need. But how do I clean it out, right? And at the time, we didn't really have anything. Measure Killer didn't exist yet or anything like that. So it was one of those
We
cases
had
where I just hadn't.
it was just there. What was it? MK Feldman had one tool for that. There was a special PBIT file that worked well-ish, but that was the only thing that was out there.
Yeah.
But yes, it was really hard to actually do auditing and cleanup, right?
Yeah, yeah. So then I made the field finder, which was such a hacky way of, busting into the report file of the PBIX. And then I shared it broadly, and then my co-witch, Shannon Lindsay, and I were presenting on that at some conference, and somebody there who was watching said, "What is this witchcraft?" So that's where Data Witches was born. And we decided we really liked and the idea of using witchcraft for for our data activities. So that's where Data Witches came from. And now, years later, now it's my full-time gig.
And I just linked to people as well, or relink them to the website and everything for Data Witches. Just
Great,
out of
thank you.
curiosity, I do like the design of that. Is that like just WordPress, or what do you use as the backend? I'm always curious for people who build out their websites.
Yeah, well, actually, even more fun facts. So, my daughter, when she was 12, designed our original logo. She just drew it. She put the little drawings of Shannon and myself, and Shannon's got, she's a redhead, so that's why that's orange, and I have gray hair, so that's why it's purple. But then kind of became a whole family affair. My nephew does graphic design, so he took her drawing and he made it into an official, logo, and he gave it a nice font and everything. And then his sister, my niece, is a web developer, so I hired her to make the website. So I actually don't know the details of how she made it, but yeah, I really like it too. So maybe I think on the website, or maybe I think Shannon is even here. Shannon, if you can you put Julia's info in the chat? So if
Oh yeah,
anybody wants
very
to.
very lower right at the bottom. Yeah, there's site by Julia Sharp. I see it.
Yep,
There you go.
that's it. Yep, Julia Sharp and her brother Noah did the logo. So yeah, they do a great job if you want to reach out to them ever.
Perfect. I appreciate that. Thank you. I'm also just I'm still getting used to this. Like YouTube recently updated their chat, so now people get like rankings from their I guess who is
Ooh,
considered to be a top fan, or like because there's numbers next to it. There's like a number one and a number two, and I
I
actually have no idea
see.
how it does its ranking, or at least I've never looked into it. But apparently, it I think it's trying to incentivize it more like Twitch, so like it's YouTube's way of encouraging participation, where you get experience points the more you talk with the chat. It's just funny
So
that they're making it
Chewy and
more
Shannon
Twitch-like.
are
Yeah,
neck and neck here, right? For number one and number two, I see.
exactly. That's pretty funny. Um, but thinking of and we're pivoting to the topic of the day today in licensing. So from a high level, like where do you want to take the conversation or start the conversation for that?
Yeah, so licensing. This was another tool that I built just because with Power BI before, it was a lot easier to figure out, should I do premium,
Yeah.
PPU, pro? It was still kind of a pain. But it was more standard, right? There was basically
Yeah.
a hard and fast number of users where it would make more sense for you to, get the premium P1 than PPU or pro, right? So it was a lot easier.
Exactly.
But then with Fabric, everything got so much more complicated because all the premium features are now available in all the F SKUs. It doesn't have to be the F64 only. But then some other changes have come in too as well. Like, for example, we'll go into this a little bit more, but there is no longer a nonprofit discount for those premium SKUs, which really changes the math for nonprofits. And so the math just got a lot more complicated. So I spent a lot of time trying to wrap my head around it and then built a calculator to help make that math easier for everybody else.
Yeah, exactly. And as you've mentioned, the expanding universe has definitely made it a bit more like I love Venn diagrams, like the overlap of kind of where to buy and what and also what you need for performances has made it a little trickier to figure out what to at least how to trim the fat efficiently for some of this stuff
Yeah,
for
yeah, for
licensing.
sure. So I have some slides just to talk about
Yeah.
some of the kind of high level concepts for it. And then I thought I would also just like to walk you through how to use
Sure.
some of these different calculators a little bit.
And let's flip over to that. Here we are.
Okay. All right. So you can see here, I'm not going to go through all the slides because I want to just make sure we have time to chitty chat about everything and answer any questions. But so with licensing, just how does it work overall and what are the components? So we're going to talk about that a little bit. Um, so let me just find my slides here. Okay, and now it's being uncooperative. Okay, all right, here I am. Okay, so here's what we have with Fabric, right? We're not going to go into too many details about what is Fabric, but we have the main workloads there at the top, and then we've got the compute and we've got storage. So these are really your components for licensing. So first of all, you have to pay for storage. This is one of the components in OneLake. So this is all for your whole tenant is your storage cost. Second, we've got compute. So this is really the most complex one, which we'll go into a little bit more detail, but this is where it really gets difficult to figure out what SKU do I need. And then thirdly, you may or may not need user licenses for Power BI depending on your SKU. So these are really the main three components. Were you going to say something, Reed? I thought I heard you.
Oh, I might have just picked up ambient noise.
Okay. All right. So we'll go into this in a little bit more detail. So storage is in US West 2. So this is just an example. It's basically $23 a month per terabyte. So this is probably one of your least expensive components for Fabric. Second is your capacity, F2 to F2048. So it really, we start at a much lower entry point than we had with Power BI Premium. And then it goes up to, I think, twice as big as we had as an option for Power BI Premium. So it's really difficult to know how much you need. There are more complications. You can pause, you can scale up, you can scale down. Your usage is averaged out over time with bursting and smoothing. So all of these little things make it hard to figure out which one you need. If in the past you used Power BI Premium P1, that's equivalent to an F64. So then you just basically reduce it by half or double it to see everything in the range. So we can go down to 32 to 16 to 8 to 4 to 2, and then up all the way to 2048.
Remind me
And then
again,
just like
what is the 2048 per month? I just the curiosity.
I have that. We'll look at it in the calculator because
Okay.
I have that
Okay.
there. It's real cheap, real cheap.
Of course.
No.
Yeah. I can retire probably off of like 3 months of payment
Yeah,
to that one.
yeah. So we'll look at that. And then Power BI licenses. So just like with a P SKU, with a P1, your consumers didn't need to have a Power BI Pro license. Your developers still did, but not your consumers. So it's the same thing here with Fabric, F64 and above. Your consumers don't need it, but your Power BI developers still do. So we still do have PPU, which is premium per user, but that does not include non-Power BI Fabric workloads. And then we've still got Pro as well. So let's just jump into a little bit, the storage part. So this is the easy part. I'm calling it the easy part, but even as I'm looking at this, I'm like, it's still a little bit complex. It's not just that $23 per terabyte per month, because you've got your BCDR, you've got One Lake cache, and then there can be data transfer network charges as well. But overall, this is your simplest part, is the One Lake storage. And then I'm going to jump into the second simplest part, which is the user licenses, because capacity is where things get complicated. So this is mostly Power BI specific, right? So for anything else in Fabric, not Power BI, you do not need to have a Power BI Pro or PPU license. This is just for Power BI content. And so you can see here in this chart, the different types of user licenses and what you can and cannot do with them. So and again, for F64 and above, your consumers don't need the Power BI Pro license. So this is really a big component. But then there are some other things too, which you can see again on this chart. Prices did go up this year for individual Power BI licenses. First time in like 10 years. So I don't know how you feel about it, Reed, but I'm not too mad about this. I think this is pretty reasonable to increase it once, in 10 years.
I would agree. I mean, it's actually funny is I feel like there is a similar parallel every time, at least in my universe, of like when if game prices ever go up by like $10 and people are complaining, oh God, we have to pay like $80 for games. And I was like, do you not remember back in '95 when like an Nintendo 64 game cost $80 or $90? Like relative to cost of inflation, I think certain things, yes, it sucks that it went up, but like I feel like there are certain things that innately we have to complain when the price goes up, but then like context, think about it, think about how much everything else has gone up in the last 10 years and how affordable this is for your company comparatively. So I don't think it's bad of a thing. And if anything, I'd still say at 14 now, it's probably still 30%, 40% less than it would have been 10 years ago for if $10 followed inflation.
Yeah, and I mean, with all of the features that we've gotten in the last 10 years, it definitely feels reasonable to me. I mean, just imagine what we can do now in Power BI that we couldn't do 10 years ago. So I'm not too mad about this. And also, even though the nonprofit prices went up and education, they do still exist in the Pro and PPU licenses. Those discounts are still there. So that's good news. All right, so we got through the easy parts pretty quick, right? But now
Exactly.
it's the capacities, which is definitely the hard part. So we talk about it in terms of capacity units. This is the compute power. It's the unit of measurement representing the compute power needed. And then your CU consumption is highly correlated to the underlying compute effort needed for the task. So refreshing a Power BI semantic model, your data warehouse, Spark, all of these things are going to have different CU consumption rates. So how do you know, right? This is where we're going to get to. But also, how are you charged? So this is not you're charged by how much you use. You're charged for how much time your capacity is up and running. So your consumption doesn't affect your bill. There is a little asterisk here. It affects how much power you have available. So just know that if your capacity is running, you're paying for it, so it's not like just if you're doing jobs that are consuming it. No, it's if it's running, you're paying for it. There is reservation pricing. So if you know that you're going to need your capacity running at least 60% of the time is the rule of thumb, then you want to consider reservation pricing. It's much, much cheaper. If you're not using the reservation, if you want to get a little bit more complex with your planning and you want to use pay as you go, you can do some strategies for pausing your capacity, even scaling them up and down as needed. But there are limits to how much you can scale it up. It's called a quota. All right. So, yes, also notice if you do try to get sneaky and you just want to stop your capacity, thinking that, okay, I've used more than I've paid for and I'm just going to pause it. You will get a bill for that. So you can't really get around it. Yeah. All right. So then how much do I have? So this is, here's your answer to your question. Reed, you were asking how much is a 2048. So pay as you go 2048 in US West 2 is $269,000 a month.
If you
Wow.
pay as you go, yeah, that's it's a good amount of money
Wait,
right
is
there.
that right? Yeah, yeah, yeah. I think yeah,
Yeah,
that
because
looks a little
it's
bit
like
funny.
it's like 1.5 times usually for pay as you
Yeah,
go
yeah,
versus
yeah.
reservation, right? Yeah, yeah. Or for like
Yeah.
there you go, 40%. Yeah.
Yeah,
Oof.
exactly. I know it's a lot, right? Okay, so but what do these things mean, right? These capacity units. So this is how many you have available per second. So for an F2, it's 2 per second at the cost of 18 cents per hour. So this is how you get that total cost for the pay as you go. And so if you want, you can do this completely oversimplified calculation to figure out how many CUs you have in a time period. The reason I say it's oversimplified is because it's not just like, oh, okay, so I have 2.4 million CUs to use however I want in 2 weeks. No, there are limits on like the 30 seconds and the hourly and things like that. So this is where that bursting and smoothing will take effect. So that's why I'm just saying, it gives you a rough idea, but it is very oversimplified. Does that make sense?
Absolutely.
Okay. All right. Excellent. So how much do I need? Right. I have no idea. So there's this huge range between super affordable to super expensive. So there is documentation on a variety of the workloads in Fabric to kind of give you an idea of what the consumption rates are. So here's a table about data flow gen 2 consumption rates. So we do get this information and I do appreciate that it exists, but I think it doesn't necessarily help you figure out how much to estimate that you're going to need. And same thing here with like the pipelines. Here's the cost of the pipelines. How many CUs? What the consumption rate is. So to me, this is great. It's helpful information. It's nice to have it there, but it doesn't exactly clarify for me how much I might need. It's still as clear as mud to me. So if I'm trying to estimate what am I going to need, those things don't really help. So really, honestly, I feel like at this point, and this is debatable, Reed, so I'd love to hear your perspective. I think you really just have to build some representative workloads and monitor it
Yeah.
over time and adjust. I have not found, a really helpful way to figure out, yep, this is exactly the capacity I'm going to need.
There's a lot of variable condition and the consultant answer, and it depends for a lot of that stuff. But like monitoring at a minimum, I think is very crucial for this stuff to help actually figure out if you need more fat or if you can trim some fat off.
Yeah. Yep, definitely. So I think, you just get the trial or get a capacity and start building and monitoring. There's really just not a straightforward answer in how much capacity you might need. And then additionally, there are loads of considerations to keep in mind too. Um, so I had this chart here before. It used to be more important because not all FSKUs were created equally. You can see I have a couple little smiley faces here now because um, AI skills and Copilot, you used to have F64 or above. So that was a little red X before. Fortunately, now it's a green check because these are available in all of the FSKUs. The only thing that requires you to have F64 or above is if you want your consumers to be able to view your Power BI items without a per user license. So this is getting better and better. I'm happy to see that.
I like the
Oh,
emojis, by the way.
and there's no P, by the way. I forgot to click. Yeah, the emojis are helpful. Yeah, so there's no P anymore. So these are what used to be available with P, but we can't buy P anymore. So we can only buy FSKUs from now on. Okay, and one thing we have also learned since all this has come out is that Copilot can cost a lot. It can use up a lot of capacity, right? And so that's one of the concerns people have is, hey, if I buy this capacity and I let my users run free with Copilot, what's going to happen? Well, they could really throttle you. So to take care of that, there's this thing now called the Fabric Copilot capacity. So you can also purchase one of these Copilot capacities, which you then assign to users rather than workspaces. So they will use Copilot under this capacity as opposed to the capacity that you're sharing with all of your other workloads. So important to keep
Oh,
this in mind as an
the
option.
yeah, the remind me of like the pricing for that one. So like these things can you change. So like that has an even lower pricing than I think a standard capacity because it's really it is only allowed to be assigned to users only. Like you can't even assign it to a workspace if you wanted to, right? Or is this a concept? I can't remember.
No, I can't remember either. So I think we should look that up because I don't have a
Oh
straightforward
yeah,
answer for you.
I'll do
I
a
thought it
side
was
lookup for that. Yeah.
okay. That sounds good.
But the
Okay.
like it reminds me of similar conversations with premium capacities and others where I like the pattern where like people would have premium per user and then you put all your dev and test and share it and then you keep your capacity clean for that to save on cost because otherwise you'd end up with extra expenses. And I think there's now a similar parallel where people can you buy some type of extra capacities for either certain features or for your messy dev and test because it's if you throw everything into one, you're probably going to end up collectively paying a lot more for that because of the noisy neighbor syndrome than you would if you
Yes.
split them. Yeah.
Yeah. And so that's where things get even more complicated, right? So it's not just choosing, oh, which capacity do I need? It's which combination from this whole menu of capacities and licenses do I need? So it can get pretty hairy.
The question is from Guy Johnson's. Just now they were speaking of capacities and stuff. If you have an answer to this, so could you get an FSKU and set it up for use in a schedule such as 8 hours a day, 5 days a week, where it will automatically pause outside of those time frames?
I don't believe we have an automatic pausing yet, do we, Reed? I know that you can set it up yourself through like Power Automate, or you can, yeah, you can use Power Automate to do it, but it doesn't, there is no scheduling in the Azure portal as far as I know of.
No, but I mean, it's not too difficult to do. It's like a 2 or 3 piece process in Power Automate. It's basically just turn on X, turn off X. The issue does become if you're uh, multiple time zone company or anything of a certain size, it's a little harder to know when to turn it on and off because or if you have to trigger it to turn on when like okay, it notices there's a ping of somebody trying to access the report, it turns on, but then they have to wait 45 to 60 seconds at least for those. But yeah, that's the Power Automate option for any capacity. Fabric Opinion has been around since essentially Power BI Opinion came out. So that is the number one easiest way to do it is just do a scheduler using those systems.
Yeah. So yes, Guy, the answer is yes, but it's not, you'll have to do a little setup with Power Automate. All right, so some more consideration. So one tenant can have multiple capacities, and then each capacity can support multiple workspaces. So this is where that complexity Reed was just talking about was kind of is like you don't have to have all of your workspaces assigned to the same capacity. You really want to think about what makes sense for you because each workspace can be assigned to only one capacity. So capacity can have multiple workspaces, but a workspace can only be assigned to one capacity. So what does this look like? Okay, so I have my data, which is tenant, and there's my one lake, which is for the whole tenant. And then maybe I have these 3 capacities. I've got A, which is an F32, B, which is an F8, and C, which is an F64. I've got that C one. I've got CoPilot enabled in there. I've also got enabled in my F32. And so C, I don't have any workspaces. I just have people. So these are just, this is just an example of how you might want to think about your capacity strategy is really based on your workspaces and your workloads and what you're doing in there. And you may want to, think about this in advance. And also you're probably going to be tweaking it over time. But this is just a sample idea of how you might want to do this. But just remember that your tenant can have multiple capacities and your capacity can support multiple workspaces and or people in the case of that Copilot capacity.
This link to the Microsoft Learn doc on the Fabric Copilot capacity specifically as well. And of course, like scanning through it is like, is this only available to assign to users or not? It's meant for users, but nothing. I don't see any limitation where it says like you can't assign this to a workspace because it needs to reside on at least an F2 or higher. Which so I think you're essentially still buying a regular capacity, but it's just a special type of regular capacity meant for Copilot.
And it's something in the admin settings or the capacity setting where you say if it's a Fabric Copilot capacity FCC. Yeah.
I would imagine it probably gets rid of it from like workspace drops down. Like it would make sense to do so, where you can only assign it to users, not workspace. But it doesn't seem to explicitly. It doesn't make it very clear from Microsoft Learn doc, honestly.
Yeah. Yeah. There's always room for us to test things out, right? And figure out the answers to those questions. All right, so we talked about scaling and pausing also, which you do in the Azure portal. And again, reminder that pausing does not wipe out your CU debts. So if you've gone way over, you do still have to pay that off either over time or by pausing your capacity and just paying for it. But one thing that I think is really cool is that shortcuts do let you access data that's in like a lakehouse or a warehouse, in a workspace where the capacity is paused. It does not cut off your access to the data. The data is still there. So I do have a link here for how you can use OneLake shortcuts to access data across capacities, even when the capacity is paused. So here you can see, for example, let's see, if we pause the capacity in capacity 1, which is our bronze workspace, but we do not pause capacity 2, and we have a shortcut from a lakehouse in capacity 2 to capacity 1, that still works and it's fine. So that's something to just keep in mind. I don't feel like I hear two people, I don't hear that get spoken about a lot, but I think it's a really important consideration. I think there is kind of a myth out there that, if I have data in a lakehouse in a workspace that's with a paused capacity, I can't access it. And that is false. You definitely can still access that data. So that's just
Yeah, so I would always assume that it was kind of like I could I usually don't do too much of the back end setup versus my engineering team. But okay, so yeah, so it's essentially as you said, it'll consume from number two. It just transfers it over, even though A is off. The actual storage itself is still accessible, but the CPU and RAM is just used in the second capacity.
yep. So that's cool, right?
Yeah.
Just yet one more component to help you figure out how you want to set up your capacity strategy. Okay, even more considerations. So if you want to take advantage of Direct Lake, and if you're not sure what that is, there are loads of really good resources out there to learn about Direct Lake mode for Power BI in Fabric. There are limitations based on these SKUs as well. So if you have decided, we really, really want to use Direct Lake and we do not want it to fall back to Direct Query, then this is important for the SKU that you choose as well. So you can see like the F2 through the F32, your max rows for your largest table in your semantic model is 300 million rows. If you pull that table into a model that's using Direct Lake, it will fall back to Direct Query. And it's not based on any filters in your semantic model or your report or anything like that. It's if you're hitting that table and there's more than 300 million rows, it's going to fall back to Direct Query. Now, I don't think this is terrible, but I think it's important to know. And another one with that is your max memory. So you do still have the same max memory limits as you had in the P SKUs. But the real bummer here is that you will get the gray box of death if your max memory is exceeded. So for Direct Lake, you'll just get fallback to Direct Query. It'll load, it might be slower. But if you go over your max memory, you're going to get the gray box of death. But one question is, well, why do I have this max memory if it's Direct Lake, right? Exactly, because this was our limit for import models before. It's the same thing. It's just that now when your users are interacting with your report, the data is getting paged into memory, paged in and out as they use it. And so if the amount that's getting paged in is bigger than this limit for your SKU, that's when you're going to see the gray box of death. So you're not always going to see it. Just if that memory amount gets paged in, then you'll see it. So these are pretty important limitations. And what were you going to ask, Reed?
Yeah. So, and I know this was a limitation initially where direct query was always a fallback, but now we have, if I recall, the option to turn off the fallback. If you turn that off, granted, also, if you hit a limit, then the visuals don't just get slower; they actually will stop working because you only have
Right.
direct link. But if you'd rather have non-working visuals, I guess, than slower visuals,
Yeah.
you could flip it off. But I guess it is a little bit. The one benefit of that is it actually is a better. It might be an easier flag to know if you are under capacity than like
Yeah.
somebody is looking at a slow report for weeks before it finally annoys them enough to like let the manager know, hey, why is this report taking 5 minutes? Oh, I had no idea. But if it breaks, you're going to get alerted much quicker. Okay, maybe we're either we need to optimize our capacity or up it by another SKU.
Yeah. Yep. So important to know that, Direct Lake is not limitless. It depends on your SKU. Yep. All right. And here's the one that bums me out the most, which is that the Power BI Premium SKUs used to offer really good discounts for nonprofits and education, like very significant. But F SKUs don't. So that's a huge disappointment. So if you are a big nonprofit and you had a P SKU, then you've got some hard thinking to do to figure out what your strategy will be. However, maybe you had the P SKU just because the math worked out. Maybe you didn't need that much capacity. So maybe a smaller F SKU can work. So it might not be as tragic as I worry that it is, but it really does bum me out that we don't have discounts for nonprofits on F SKUs anymore, particularly today when nonprofits are struggling so much. So this one breaks my heart. Yeah. But those individual Pro and PPU licenses do still have the discounts. So that's, at least we still have that, right? So that's good.
You ever give a like a particular reason why they got rid of that? I can't imagine there was that much of an abuse of this. I would be curious to know the telemetry. Like, was this 0.5% of
Yeah.
their overall for kind of acts in the program, or making it maybe just more strict on like the qualifying criteria or something?
As far as I understand, it's because the F SKUs are an Azure product and the P SKUs were like a Office product. And Office had those discounts available, but Azure does not. Azure only offers credits. But the amount of Azure credits doesn't even come close to the discount that used to exist.
Let me do a quick check. Let's see a question in the chat. I just want to see if it's relevant to bring up from Gustavo. They it's up, right? So based on that, based on the digital filters will cost a lot of money also. I'm not sure actually. And if you want to follow up on that, Gustav, I'm not positive I understand the context of the digital filter part related to what we just had on the screen, but feel free to do a follow-up question on
Visual
that one.
filters. I think if what you're talking about is direct link, visual filters will not help you. It's really the number of rows in the source table. So visual filters won't reduce the number of rows that are being pulled into memory in a way that will impact that direct link row limit. It's really just the table itself.
And yeah,
So
he's
if that's the
confirming, yes, that
question,
was
I'm
the
not
question.
sure.
Yeah.
Okay. All right. Okay. All right. So now let's talk about monitoring just a little bit, because we talked about, this is super important for us to figure out, did we choose the right capacity? Do we need a bigger one? Or can we scale it down a little bit? Okay. So this is super rough. Okay. This is just how I was trying to figure it out. This is kind of an old image of the old Fabric Capacity Metrics app. It's updated now. It's got a little bit more in it. It's really cool. You must get this app if you are the capacity admin, because you really want to know this is going to be your best friend to help you figure out if you've got the right capacity or not. So this is just kind of what it looks like. Is this app. The top right chart here is pretty important. This is going to tell you if you're hitting your limits and how often you are. If you hit it a little bit, that's okay because of that bursting and smoothing. So some spikes are just fine. It might not necessarily mean that you have to increase your capacity, but it's a really important chart to look at. Okay, so other things we have here. So in this sample, I've used 2.8 million CUs in this 14-day period. And again, remember, this is oversimplified because it's not the 14-day period that we're calculating, but I'm using it just to kind of get a rough idea of an average. So this would have to be kind of like, if your average usage is fairly consistent, then you can use this method. But okay, so I've got 2.8 million CUs, and an F64 allows me for 77.4 million SKUs in a 14-day period. So clearly, from my consumption, I do not need the F64. Were you going to say something, Reid?
Sorry, I think it might have been the ambient noise.
Okay. Yeah. So in my case, it looks like the F4 would be just fine for me. So this is just a super oversimplification, but kind of my personal method of figuring out just roughly, am I close to the right capacity for what I need? And why did I just put this exclamation point? I can't even remember. I think just to remind us about, the bursting and smoothing. So again, just use that with a little caution. Okay, but now with that, let's talk about some calculators, because this is where I think we can start putting these things together to help us figure out what we need. So
There's one
there are
thing
kind of,
that just on your the topic of compute units and bursting, where the unlike some of the previous platforms with that, where you could set your burst limit. That's still today, just for people's context, auto scaled by Fabric, but without the ability to set whatever scaling you have. That's not available yet. So you can't say like automatically give me an between an F8 and an F64, and and choose the time. It's that's all done maybe automatically in the backend today.
yes, thanks for that note. Yes, that's very true. Okay, so let's say now we want to kind of get a rough idea of what we need. So first of all, we have the general Azure calculator. So this is pretty limited in Fabric. It's really, you just select the SKU, the region, the hours, the storage amount, and it will tell you how much your Azure cost is going to be. There's this partner calculator. It's very comprehensive and a complicated Excel workbook that's only available to partners and sellers. It has a lot more inputs, but it's pretty complex. So if you're working with a partner, you can ask them to help you with looking at this partner calculator if you want. Third, data witches calculator. So I made this calculator again when I was trying to figure out, the math for should I do pro licenses, PPU, what SKU, etc. It only gets updated when I have time. It's always in progress. So feel free to send me a note if you use it and it doesn't seem right. I'm trying to keep it as accurate as I can. And then fourth, we have the official calculator, which is currently in public preview. It has fewer inputs than the partner calculator, and it won't help you if you're just trying to focus on Power BI. It's really going to help you figure out the SKU. But if you think about how, maybe I'll use these things together, I think they can all be helpful. So let's just kind of demo them a little bit. Let me walk through what some of these look like. Okay. So this one is the can you see it, Reed? I just want to make sure. Oops, I just got rid of it. All right, can you see the calculator, Reed? Okay, all right, so this is the Azure one. So again, like I said, this is pretty basic. You'll just choose, I want to use Fabric, and you will tell it what region. Let me zoom in a little. You'll tell it what region. So maybe I want West US 2, and I want the F8. I will have it running the full month. And I could do pay as you go. So this capacity is going to cost me $1,000 a month, but if I do reserved, it'll be down to $625. It also includes your storage calculation. So if you're concerned about this, you want to put this in and figure it out. But this is really all you get pretty much from the Azure calculator. I think it's helpful once you know what SKU you want and your storage. But again, that's all there is to it. Then we have the capacity estimator. So again, this is the one that's in preview right now. And if you're going to be using a lot of different Fabric workloads, this can be really helpful. You're going to put in, let's say I want to put in some data factory information. Then I will be entering how many hours for my data flow Gen 2 ETL operations. So it's a little bit more comprehensive. This is going to help you figure out the actual SKU, but it's only Fabric. So let's say I'm looking for Power BI, and I say that I have 100 report viewers and 10 users or 10 developers. It's going to tell me, okay, well, you should get an F4. Well, maybe that's not true. Maybe I don't really need the Fabric capacity if all I'm doing is some Power BI stuff. So then that's what I'm trying to take into account for our data witches calculator. So let me just show you this one here. So if you just go to our website and you want to find the calculator, you can just go under our spells here and you'll see the Power BI licensing calculator. And there are some notes in here too, some of those kind of considerations that we talked about earlier, like the quotas and, the licensing, how it works, the capacity can have multiple workspaces, et cetera. But you can just enter your information. So I'm going to just make this a little bit bigger right now. Okay, so in this case, I said I do need Power BI premium features, such as a data set size bigger than 1 gig. I really want the XMLA endpoint. I want deployment pipelines. So I do want those premium features. I'm also saying that I need some Fabric workloads. I don't have E5 licenses, and I'm not a nonprofit. I'm looking at this in US West 2. I've got 10 Power BI devs and 160 consumers. So this is telling me that, based on my import size, I would need an F32 in this case for an import model. And for the PPU, well, actually, I can't use PPU because I want Fabric workloads, right? So this is telling me because I need Fabric workloads, I'm not even going to give you an offering here and compare PPU because PPU doesn't support that. So this is telling me, okay, you should get an F capacity of F32 and how much that's going to be for the reserved instance. It's also going to add in your total cost for your devs and your developers. So this is going to figure out, and it's saying, okay, so you need the F SKU, which is going to cost $48.81. If I didn't need those Fabric workloads, I could get PPU because that would cost me $4,000 a month. So if I want to change these things, for example, I can just edit my inputs and okay, I actually don't need Fabric after all. So I'm going to take that off. So I don't really care about how many capacity units I have, what percentage of time. There's my number of developers and consumers. And so now it's suggesting, okay, because you don't need those Fabric workloads, you can use PPU. That would be the suggestion. You can also change your region here. So if I were to switch this, for example, I can do South Africa West, and I can see what is my cost there as well. So that's going to change it just a little bit.
The overall range of out of curiosity by region, where is this 1 to 3%, or is there can there actually be a pretty big jump depending on what region you're in for pricing?
You would almost think that you set me up with that question because that's the second page. So I have region pricing in here as well. So you can change the currency if you want. And here is just, I'm looking at a, F2 or something. So this will tell me if I don't do it, this will be the per CU price. So you can see you can see the range here. So South Africa West, the CU hourly pay as you go is 31 cents. South Africa North is 24 cents. So this is where you can kind of see that range. So France South is kind of high, Germany North is kind of high. And then I think US is 18 cents. This is usually the one that I use as an example, is the US West 2 at 18 cents. But this will give you that information. I didn't even ask you to set me up with that question.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Well, you might, I don't know if you remember this, but I think it was Buck Woody. I think he's the MVP who does a ton of training, right? If I recall.
I don't know. Does he?
Yeah, one point during the MVP summit, I think it was him. He gave a presentation on how to present to the MVP is, but so a good question is one that I can answer, but a great question will be answered on an upcoming slide. It's one of his, yeah,
Okay.
it's one of the quotes that he gave, and I use that a lot now. And every time somebody asks a question or a comment that's immediately what I'm about to get to in a couple of slides. I like that quote
Yeah.
because I think it's a great description of a really good question.
Well, great question then, Reed. Well done. Yeah, so you can find that all out here is how much is this regional pricing. This is using the Azure Cost API, but it doesn't. I'm only updating it occasionally. So I think the last time I updated it was earlier this week. So this could just possibly be a couple days out of date. I don't know. It depends. And then finally, I think my third page here is how much does each SKU cost and what are those limitations? And so again, you can choose your region if you know, I'm going to be using, Germany North. What is my cost here for the SKUs? And it looks like this one does not have a reservation pricing. So some of these reservations not available. And so that would be a bummer because it's a lot cheaper, right? So we can go back here again to my standard one, and we can see the reservation pricing as well. So these two pages are just going to give you some information on regional pricing and those limits. But it's really this first one that's going to help you out the most. And especially if you are thinking, I'm not sure I need Fabric, this is going to help you with that math especially for Pro PPU versus an FSKU. And, the math is just it's going to vary based on if you have discounts, if you have E5 licenses, things like that. And again, your region as well. So
question for some of these, is this something that you do you harvest this at all from Git or anywhere else? When let's just assume tomorrow, like a cost changes by 3 cents a day or something like that. Would you go adjust that, or is that straight from a public source?
The CU costs?
Just any of the costs that are in this report, like
Yeah,
essentially, is it
yeah.
an auto updating one?
It when I refresh it. But yes, it is auto updated. It's using the Azure Costs API. So yeah, no, none of it's hard coded. The only thing that's hard coded is the cost for the licenses, because those only change every 10 years, right? The user licenses. so those ones are hard coded. Everything else comes from the API. Yeah, so if you do know that you want to use Fabric, then you might want to suggest. So this is where you're gonna look at your monitoring, and you're gonna say, okay, in the last 14 days on average, here's the capacities I used. So this isn't going to help you plan out your capacity needs. It's going to help you figure out what SKU you need based on, you've already done some workloads and you're monitoring it now. And then here also, this is going to help you decide if you should do pay as you go or not. So if I'm only using this one capacity 20% of the time, I probably am not going to need reservation pricing, right? So this calculator is used on a per capacity basis. It's not going to help you determine, you're not going to get an answer like, okay, well, you should get 3 capacities. It's not going to do that. This is just going to help you more for Power BI and a single capacity at a time. And that's all I have. So if we just want to answer some questions or chitty chat about licensing, that'd be great.
Here, let's see. Let me double check that I didn't miss anything. If there are any questions missed, or if you have another one, feel free to drop it in with a queue as well. I'll get those to answer from either of us. But I like the fact that you have the interactive tool to allow people to be able to explore that. I think it'd be very helpful for people to at least project and give some type of an estimate, because it's hard to know those. And ideally, it would be nice to be able to start like 5% below what you actually need, rather than realizing for the first 3 months you pay double of what you end up actually needing for some of those. Oh, let's see. We have one here from Donald. I knew somebody was going to ask this.
I have no inside knowledge of that. I hope, but although I don't know. What are your thoughts on
honestly say there is honestly, like no actual information or even pretend like fake. I know, yeah, we just don't like that. That is, we all would really like that, but I think talking to people like Alex Powers and a few others, because I'm sure Microsoft managers and others have had their heads chopped off on MVPs constantly asking for, but there is, to my understanding, some complexity, more so with all of the different, because there's so many engines that run in Fabric. It's it's a platform, but technically behind the scenes there's like the Spark engine and all this other stuff. For Power BI Premium only had one for the most part, that like usually like one single design for that. So apparently because of that, it's a lot harder to have a shared capacity for those, and to have a affordable pricing on that. So like that's it's been discussed, but no plans at the moment, due to, I think, the complex nature of the Fabric platform, and how much noisy neighbor syndromes could end up happening, in it and something like that. So yes, we all want it, and it has certainly been talked about, but I think it will be a while before that's even going to be on the like, oh, we're going to get to it soon, and then it'll be like maybe another year or two after that. So that's at least my take on it. But it is a complex. It's an easy request, but a complex solution to provide something like that would be off a dedicated capacity and not a shared capacity.
Yeah, and it's and I think Shannon said here too, just because of the way it's using Azure rather than M365, among many other things. But like one of my favorite things about PPU is just that it gives you that 100 gig semantic model size. So that's even bigger than you get with an F64. So, again, this is where things just get so complicated. If you have, fewer users, but really big model size, then PPU just might make more sense. We don't have anything equivalent for an FPU.
things that I've talked to Alex a couple of times on as well. Like there's only a few things that I think would be really beneficial to be able to get over to, like, say, maybe if we just even keep it as premium per user, not fabric per user, but the data flows Gen 2 is, I think, a really big one. If we could just get that, because there's a lot of extra nice features that come with that. We don't like ignoring lake houses, warehouse, just simply having a better data flows that just sticks it into a standard data flow or like an Azure repository, something like that. Or just
Mhm.
with premium per user, you could also get all CoPilot or something like that. Just those two, I think, would be a nice upgrade. So that might be, hopefully, maybe something like that where we get a stopgap. We don't get all that. We don't get all the fabric artifacts, but um, and new items, but maybe some of the premium tech features that can help with like development, but still keeping within the kind of the it's still Power BI, but just with a few more enterprise things turned on. But even then, I know like the Dataflow Gen 2 also runs off of Azure stuff and an entirely separate engine than Dataflow Gen 1. So back to the whole, it's quite complex from an engineering perspective of how do we allocate resources that way, but reserve it just for that versus other stuff.
Yeah, yeah, that would be great. I wish we had some inside knowledge, but we don't.
Exactly. Uh, I would say, like, any takeaways that you'd recommend for people, something kind of to either look at outside of maybe the two links that I gave for both the Microsoft calculator and yours, or just any other resources for continued learning on either the topic we had today or just any of the stuff recent that you've been doing that you find particularly exciting that you'd want to share with people.
I think the monitoring, really getting comfortable with that capacity metrics app, it's just more important than ever before. Like we needed to do monitoring before just to see if, hey, do I have one really big semantic model that's, you know, causing me trouble? But now with Fabric, really getting comfortable with monitoring. So yeah, I think that would be my next suggestion. You cannot do Fabric without monitoring.
And besides the main data, which is link as well, like, I know you've done some other like side projects, or like, I just say projects with Shannon and others. Are there any other like links or resources related to some of the data witch type stuff that might be useful to share at all?
You know what? I should put my GitHub because on there I've also got the accessibility checker. So I know accessibility isn't always everybody's top of mind when you're building a Power BI report, but it's not that hard to make sure that your reports are accessible. So that's another utility we've made is the accessibility checker. So maybe I can find my GitHub here a second. And
Yeah, so it's not under your spells section.
no, it is not. And I should probably add it there, right? Yeah. So let me just grab I will put it in our chat here so you can pop it in there. Yeah, so I think those are things that I've worked on before just because I do think accessibility is really important, and it's like documentation, right? Like I'll get there one day and then you never do it. So same thing happens with accessibility. So if you can get into the habit of making sure your reports are accessible, it's a good habit to be in.
We'll say I just on the topic of documentation is there was an interesting article by, I don't know if it was Kurt, it probably was Kurt, 'cause he always has really good opinions on stuff, but it's on the like how useful is documentation if it's a separate document, like for modeling. I think like if proper flow charts and diagrams of your tenant structure in terms of how does your ingestion process go, all that I think is really important. But I almost feel like I love documentation, but inline documentation. So my measures are documented by comments in the measures and the descriptions. My Power Query is documented by the notes and the queries and all that. There might be, and then like the relationships, you can have your diagram views where you show the pipelines of all the different, kind of reports into there. I feel like 90 to 95% of the documentation can be done in the model where it's contextual versus say like, there's a lot of tools where you click a button, it scans it, it prints some report for you. But like,
Yeah.
I wonder how often are those actually looked at separately, for that. And like
Yeah.
models change so regularly. So I do love the idea of it, but my encouragement usually whenever I hear the word documentation is like in the file, in those contextual spots where you can you see it attached to the item you're looking at, you don't have to look at page 5. Okay, the measure is called this. Hold on, let me search for the measure. And then you're having
Yeah.
to, it's a side-by-side comparison, which I think is a little harder because there's no like link between the two of them. So you have to look up on a page, look at the field, and back and forth.
Yeah, my favorite one, like the bare minimum would be the measure descriptions, right? So that you can enable your self-service users to know what exactly is this measure doing. So bare minimum would be the measure description.
Yeah, exactly. And those go a long way, especially because the tooltips for live connections to help explain your text. Hey, what on earth is this doing? Oh, okay, it's doing X to Z. Some people might also call it Y or have something in there. Absolutely. Right. No other question. Oh yeah, and one final from so will your slide deck be available for download? One question from Guy on that. I think I might have just lost your audio, maybe.
You did. I muted because of my dog.
There
Sorry
you go.
about that. Yeah, I said I think I do have it. I think I might have to give you the link in just a little bit. I don't have it readily available.
Yeah, no worries. So once you have it, good, just give me the link to if you want to host it anywhere in your site, and then I can just I'll update it in the YouTube description.
Okay, perfect. Thank you.
I think then with that, no other questions from that, so we can use this to wrap up. But this has been fantastic, and I really appreciate the kind of stepped and staggered walkthrough of licensing. It helps to dispel, so to use a particular term, some of the I think gray areas and ambiguity that's around what the vibe and where it's very useful and practical.
Great, thank you. Yeah, there are a lot of gray areas. We thought it was complex before with just Power BI. Now it's like, it's just really out of hand.
And with that, I will wish you and everybody on the stream as well a good Friday, and then I'll certainly look forward to getting you back on at some point. And I think really fun stream actually sometime in the future is to get all the wizard and both witches together to do like
that'd be
a
great.
3-person stream. Yeah, we can do something fun and topical, like maybe around Halloween actually, or something.
Perfect. Yeah, that's a good idea. Sounds good.
Excellent.
Yes, thanks again for having me on.
And then everyone else, take care, and see you all next week.
Thank you so much for watching. Please consider hitting that like and subscribe button. And if you want to help support this channel, take a look at our channel memberships or our merchandise store for cool swag. And last but not least, please consider sharing this video on your social media platform of choice to help our channel grow. So, until next time.